Oh, yeah.
Goes the best view.
Um,
Come on, and oh wait, no, sorry.
Wow. Okay, you
wait,
want to
if
make
it was
I
by
just
alphabetical
heard your
order,
voice.
do we want to
I
ask?
just heard your voice. I did
Jane.
not see you.
We had a question. Dean he showed up. We have a fourth.
Should we? I'm gonna. Yeah, just go ahead and ask Marley.
What? Okay.
So Mateo.
Yeah.
Alphabetical?
Ready, guide. My shoes are definitely off. We don't see.
What? Where off? If I'm like speaking.
Can you? Or no? Like so that it doesn't turn off, like no timer. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Let's use your phone then. Can't do that on my phone. Just let me. It says auto lock never, but it works. Okay. Doesn't it really? Yeah. Yeah. So. Start now. Okay.
Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Cohen, and today with my fellow moderator, Daniela Lassell, we will be holding a debate between your candidates for student body president. I would like to start by introducing your candidates in alphabetical order by first name: Connor Sokolowski, John Cho, and Michaela Fulcher. Today's debate will consist of 7 questions, where each candidate will have 2 minutes with 30 seconds grace period to respond. Then each candidate will have 30 seconds to rebuttal in response to their fellow candidates. At the end of the 2 minutes, we will put our hand as a signal to the candidates that they only have 30 seconds grace left to finish their response. At the end of the 30 seconds, we'll announce that the candidate's time is up. The candidates have been informed of potential topics that may be covered in the debate today. However, they did not receive the questions beforehand. These questions are based on questions submitted by members of the student body. Order of candidates will rotate, starting with opening statements ordered alphabetically by first name, so Connor, John, and then Michaela. Then for the first question, we will rotate the order, so it will go John, Michaela, Connor, and so on. I would like to remind the candidates of 2 of William & Mary's values: integrity and respect. We highly encourage that the candidates be respectful of one another during today's debate. However, Daniela and I will only step in as moderators if candidates fail to respect one another's allotted time, and the candidates are free to speak their minds during their time to speak. To begin, each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement that was prepared beforehand. We will start with Connor.
Great. Hello, and thank you again for coming out tonight. I can't wait to share more about my campaign platform, although an hour is nowhere near enough to cover the depth and breadth of our ideas. First and foremost, I'm beyond excited to have partnered with Bryce Early for this campaign. For those of you who don't know, we had an incredibly close election against each other our freshman year, with only a 7 votes difference. Despite losing such a close race, Bryce reached out to me immediately to grab lunch. I learned all about how kind and genuine she is, and knew immediately that she was someone to be admired. Flash forward 3 years to now, Bryce and I have converged, this time on the same ticket. We have spent many months researching all components of our platform, and I'll try to cover as much as we can tonight. Our comprehensive DEI platform was shaped by student leaders on campus whose experiences lend to the different goals we seek to achieve. Such goals include outreach and advocacy for the new Preferred Names on Tribe Cards pilot program that aims to replace past efforts such as the Pride and Appearance Act from Student Assembly. We also include the creation of safe spaces on campus for the LGBTQ+ community, expanding internship opportunities to Black-owned businesses, supporting ongoing research regarding the history of Native Americans on this campus, student accessibility services, and more. Additionally, we have a robust mental health and wellness platform that focuses on expanding a number of resources. We will introduce a wellness survey to help provide tangible metrics from which we can learn more about student well-being and adapt accordingly. In tune with this, the school has already provided research funding for a project to combat loneliness. Another massive priority for our platform is to improve the sexual assault resources. We have spent extensive time researching ways to enhance the existing evidence collection systems while also looking at how to most effectively support existing resources such as the Haven. I detail the investment of a large portion of Student Assembly reserves to endow a sustainable part-time position at the Haven for a graduate student in the Counseling Master's program, among other proposals. I have discussed potential for this idea with administrators, and the feasibility is there. Finally, we address some more general issues that directly affect every student. We want to specifically rezone parking outside of sorority houses to give those spaces to people living in the houses, which increases the amount of on-campus parking and safety. For dining, we want to work with Sodexo to improve food options to include special dietary restrictions such as vegetarian, vegan, kosher, and halal. Also, my role on the Williamsburg Planning Commission serves as a way to get student voices heard with regards to equitable, affordable, and quality housing. We were careful to make sure that our platform is rock solid, including no HIPAA violations or
Your time
outdated
is up.
initiatives. I have not only the experience and knowledge to get shit done, but the passion, desire, and commitment to do so.
Hey, so hi everyone. My name is John Cho. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a junior studying kinesiology and public health with a minor in data science. I'm originally from Newport News, Virginia, which is just right down the road. I'm really excited to be talking with you tonight and to be running to be your next student body president. I have been reflecting a lot on why I was motivated to run, and I found myself leaning into my experiences coming into William and Mary. As a freshman, I was working 2 part-time jobs. I was helping at our family business, and I was the primary caregiver to a younger brother with Down syndrome. And I found that there were a lack of resources and leaders on campus who were willing to listen to me and advocate for me. And that's exactly why Jasmine and I are running. We want to make sure that you are heard, that you are empowered, that you have the resources that you need to make the changes you want to see on campus. Yeah, I look forward to talking with you all tonight. Thank you for coming.
Hey everyone, my name is Michaela, and I'm so excited to be here running for your student body president. I am a junior that majors in marketing and art, but I did start off as like bio pre-med, so I've been all around the track, and I've probably seen a bunch of you guys. I'm so excited for you guys to get to know me tonight, and my goal for tonight is for you guys to feel comfortable being able to talk to me about anything and everything, whether that's about your feelings or about what you think Student Assembly can improve on. So there's a lot of things that separate me from my other candidates, and we'll probably get to that tonight. But one of the biggest things is that my platform is only has 3 main points, and that's outreach, transparency, and health and wellness. And that's because I feel, as a president, I shouldn't be the person that tells you what we should work on, but the person that listens to you. So my main goal is for everyone to tell me what you want to do. And so as president, I would definitely always be there, reaching out and asking questions to do what you want to do.
Our first question is, how does your involvement at William & Mary and engagement in the community demonstrate your dedication to the position and responsibilities? What skills will you apply from your other engagements in the position of SA president? John?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, a lot of what I did on campus was based off my own experiences, especially as a freshman. And I was fortunate to first join and be the president of the Food Recovery Network, working towards food insecurity and making sure that every single student had the resources they need. Then that led to joining Student Assembly, and becoming the Secretary of Sustainability. I helped implement the compost system and served on the Committee on Sustainability. I think I learned a lot about the value of student advocacy and being able to empower others to make change. And currently, I have the privilege of serving as the Chief of Staff. So I'm involved in almost every single policy area, helping implement policies, initiatives, and connecting the student body with administrators. I also am a part of the Office of STEP, which is the Student Transition Engagement Programs, as an orientation area director. And again, leaning into my freshman experience, I want to make sure that every single student had an equitable introduction to William & Mary with the resources that they need. And I was also a part of the exec team for HOPE, which is Health Outreach Peer Educators. I served as a substance and alcohol safety sensibility specialist. And to be vulnerable, I had substance abuse issues in high school, and I found that a lot of the conversations we needed on campus needed to be destigmatized to make sure that every single student had the resources and could be empowered to talk about what they needed to.
Could you repeat the question just so I can make sure I answer it?
How does your involvement at William & Mary and engagement in the community demonstrate your dedication to the position and responsibilities? What skills will you apply from your other engagements in the position of SA President?
Perfect. Thank you so much. So a bunch of students here, we all have the same thing in common, and that's that we probably have been super involved throughout high school, college, and everything like that. So when I came to college, I wanted to switch it up, and instead of spreading myself really thin, I wanted to focus on 3 things that meant the most to me. So that has been student assembly, my sister sorority, and being a tour guide. So, okay, this is more than 3, as well as being a fitness instructor. So those are things that have meant the most to me, and I thought it was really important to not spread myself too thin, but put as much as I could into that. So as a tour guide, that just shows my love for William & Mary. I spend my days like talking about how much I love this school and how much I hope for everything to be like what students want. So that's something that is going to translate over to being president. Then I'm also, in my roles as student assembly, I've been the Secretary of Outreach for the past 2 years. So that's been pretty fun. And then I also was the Director of Public Relations and Marketing for my sorority. So all that kind of points to me wanting to be active and involved with the student life. And I think that's really important as a president, to have a connection with the people that you're representing. Another thing that I have done is I have served on the Arts Visioning Committee. So I serve as the one student representative with a bunch of faculty members about the different arts going on at William & Mary. So that's given me the chance to talk to faculty and staff and really make sure students' opinions are heard, especially our students who don't really get as much representation as they should.
Go right into it. All right, yeah, so basically, coming out of high school, I actually had no intention really of running for a position like this. I didn't hold it in high school. I was inspired freshman year by then SA President Kelsey Vita kind of giving a presentation and orientation about what you can get involved in with student assembly. And so I kind of ran on a whim. And ever since then, as in my role as class president, I've come to really grow into it and find out exactly what you can do. And every year, it always comes to the question of, what is in student assembly purview, and really it's whatever you want it to be, whatever work you want to put into it can be SA purview. And so that's kind of taken my work and kind of defined what I've done through these years. So for example, last year when our 7 varsity sports cut, and I am a student athlete here, I'm on the swim team, and so I was one of those cut teams. I spent and worked with a number of people, probably collective, like thousands and thousands of hours, millions of dollars raised, but basically getting staff testimonials, coaches, students, alumni, donors, everybody involved to help push this legislation through and work with faculty assembly to bring the changes that needed to happen to the athletic department in the community. I'm also involved in the city, so I'm the sole student involved on the Planning Commission and as well as the Public Arts Council of Williamsburg. And there I'm able to really advocate for students in affordable, equitable, and accessible housing off campus. There's a 3-person rule that is really inhibiting access to housing off campus, and it causing tensions in the community. And basically from all of these involvements and lessons learned, I know how to navigate a space where students aren't represented well. I know how to navigate a space where people don't want you to be speaking your voice because you're challenging the status quo, you're challenging what has already been there, the laws that are already there, the decisions that have already been made. And so I am prepared to do that this next year and really take those lessons to the next level.
Now have 30 seconds for rebuttals. John?
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that all the three of us are pretty involved on campus. I think something that distinguishes our campaign with Jasmine and I is our willingness to create a community-driven and constituent-focused administration. You'll notice with our platform, a lot of our different ideas were action-oriented, making sure that we stray away from these really big and vague ideas. Like, we can't solve mental health, but what can we do to help resolve and help students with their issues?
I think one thing that's important as a student body president is to know when you don't need to say extra stuff. So I do not have a rebuttal, and that's it.
Yeah, to that extent, I know we have a number of very lofty goals that I know we won't finish this year, but it's really important that we take very specific actionable items to move forward on those projects. That's something that our campaign has worked really hard to make sure that we have. That's it.
All right, the next question. William & Mary is a predominantly white institution. How can you work with and amplify the voices of marginalized communities as student body president? Michaela?
That's a great question. So one thing that I could bring to student body president is I am the only female candidate running, so I could definitely bring a perspective about being like in a predominantly male space and being able to speak up from that. And then I'm also a Black woman, in case you could not tell that. So I have experience of always being in like predominantly right areas, and I really do know how to speak up when it's important. That's something that a lot of people will describe about me, is that I'm a very vocal person at all times. So another thing about me is that I'm also able to like perceive people really well. So when people don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing their opinions, I will always take the time out of my day to like step out and be like, hey, like, how did that make you feel? And like, is there a way that I can help you in any way, shape, or form? So I think honestly, just being a minority, like of the highest level, and then also being like perceptive is one of the best things like you could have to represent minority communities. And also, I think a lot of things that happens is sometimes when we're running, we all of a sudden go to a bunch of minority-based places that we haven't been before. And I don't think that's something, I don't think you should just show up when it's time to run. I think you should be there all the time. So something I would do is continue being involved in the spaces I am, and then make it a place where people can come to me, like leaders of different minority organizations. They can always feel comfortable reaching out to me, but I'm not going to insert myself in a community that I wasn't a part of just because I am running for something.
Rotate here. Okay, yeah. So I think it's important that, yeah, Bryce and I recognize that we don't bring a lot of diversity to our ticket. And that's why it's been a top priority of our campaign to really build our entire platform from student leaders on campus and give them a space to bring ideas. Our DEI platform is entirely informed by student leaders on campus who brought these here. We have very specific, I think we're the only platform that has explicit initiatives for very specific communities on campus, whether it's the LGBTQ plus community, the Black community, Native American community, and more. And it's also important to recognize while our sections of our platform are based in those DEI initiatives, we're really looking to break out of that as well, because there are other issues that impact marginalized communities on campus that aren't talked about as much. And so one example, in our academic affairs platform piece, we're looking at expanding course offerings by partnering with some HBCUs on the peninsula. And now, granted, there are steps that we need to take to ensure that something like that is possible, and first and foremost, making campus a more inclusive environment for perhaps a visiting professor from an HBCU. And so these are ideas that we have to work towards that goal. Also, as a student athlete, there's a lot of stereotyping, a lot of negative attacks kind of on student athletes as a whole, and it's important to recognize that we do have one of the most diverse populations on this campus, and that a lot of these attacks towards student athletes are getting racialized and impacting people in those marginalized communities. And that's really become a top priority. The final point I want to make is that I am part of a lot of PWI groups within a PWI institution, and oftentimes it's these areas that don't necessarily receive the exposure to diversity that is required to change our campus environment for the better. We often hold DEI trainings and workshops through campus, and it feels like we see the same faces showing up. People that already know that they need to come, know about it, don't need that exposure as much, and so we would really like to leverage our roles to bring that education outward.
Yeah, so as I mentioned with my opening statement, Jasmine and I are really focused on amplifying and empowering different organizations and communities at William & Mary. Our biggest thing is we want to shift the culture of, instead of student assembly dictating and telling different organizations and communities what they need, asking and inviting these different groups to come to us and going to them also and like explaining what we can do to empower them. Something that we want to implement was enforcing DEI trainings for every single recognized student organization, and this is an initiative already taking place under the Bujala Goodman administration, but making sure that every single leader on campus is equipped with the right resources to facilitate an environment of inclusivity and diversity. Our biggest thing is, as student assembly, we, as elected representatives, it is not our goal to put our name and our logo on every single thing that we pass or we fund. Our goal should be to make sure that every single resource is given to as many communities as we can reach. Thank you.
I think it's really important to recognize that while efforts to increase DEI are really important, it's hard to talk for people that you're not a part of a community for, and also reaching out to people, like just one person from an organization. That's really nice in theory, but one person cannot speak for a whole community. So I think that's something to keep in mind when, no matter who gets elected or who you're voting for, just keep in mind that one person can't speak for a whole community. And it's important to be someone that people feel comfortable to come to, and not someone that has to.
Right. Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Michaela, on that note, right? Bryce and I know what is kind of outside of our scope of perspectives and experiences and what we bring to the student body, and that's why the people we work with, too, is we're not choosing them for the organizations they're a part of or trying to have them represent a community as a whole and generalize that. We're working with them to hear their own ideas, their individual experiences, because that's what ultimately matters the most for our campaign.
Yeah, I'll just echo everything that they said. I would disagree to the point where decreasing the number of DI trainings because the same faces show up. I don't believe that's effective, in which if we are hosting these opportunities, allowing students to show up, we are empowering these different communities on campus. And being able to equip every single student, as many voices as we can reach, I think is effective, making sure that we can have an inclusive and a diverse environment.
There is currently a mental health crisis quite prevalent across college campuses, including at William & Mary. What are some solutions you can put forth in your role as student body president to address this issue? And how do you plan to work with the administration to address mental health? Connor.
That's a great question. I'd like to take like a couple seconds at the beginning just to clarify. I was looking to expand DEI initiatives to people that don't get access to them, not decrease the amount that are existing. Now, with regards to mental health and wellness, that's something that's really important to our campaign. One of the biggest things we really are hoping to implement is is having a set schedule of mental health surveys. So these are things that are currently used in peer-reviewed behavioral, economic, and psychological journals in an effort to have a metric of where students are at in their well-being and track our progress. And for an example, if we were to visualize this, let's say in the fall, early fall, people might be a little bit happier, might decrease through finals. Spring, who knows what that might look like, weather gets good, it increases. But basically what we're hoping to start is having this set of metrics that then year after year, we can hopefully see an increase as college policies change and as we adapt our platform. This is also valuable information for administration in terms of initiatives they see fit. It's just a way to track improvement. On that note, too, we're hoping to expand wellness days. Now, this is something we're not totally sure can happen this next year because the calendar is set and there are a minimum number of requirements of days in session. However, this is something that President Rowe has also expressed in favor for, is wellness days in addition to a break, not in place of a break, don't worry. Just because the marginal benefit of having this extra day of rest is just so much greater than that extra day of class, especially if you don't have anything due the day after. We're also looking at expanding the counseling resources, perhaps staggering staffing hours to expand when people can actually get help, and also looking into hiring a post-traumatic growth therapist, specifically to alleviate a lot of like red flag cases in the mental health department.
So our platform outlines a couple of different potential solutions, both long-term and short-term, to alleviate some of the shortages. I think it's important to realize that a lot of the shortages and the limited number of appointments is due to a nationwide shortage of staff and mental health professionals. And something that we believe that we could utilize is advocating for expanded telehealth appointments and making sure that we are utilizing and making sure that students have access to the appointments that they need. We also wanted to continue increase diversity and professional development for mental health professionals, making sure that they have the resources and they can adequately help our different marginalized communities on campus. And currently, we have different group therapy options limited to a limited number of different topics. And we want to make sure that every single population at William & Mary had a safe space with a mental health professional that they could turn to and go to talk about their issues. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's really important when talking about health and like mental wellness and stuff like that, to know that student assembly can't change things at the school. We can't hire new people and we can't like change hours. That's something that would be really hard and take maybe like a year at least, and then that would have to be pushed on to the next like ticket. So I think it's important to think about tangible actions. And so something could be doing a wellness day that's not gonna actually change the calendar. So that could just be like having a fun activity like on a Friday where students can come to, and that does not necessarily need any administration's like approval. We don't have to change the calendar. We don't have to hire extra people. So it's just great to think about tangible things. Another thing is that I would love to work on is improving how we work with Counseling Center and like showing out more resources instead of like adding stuff on, just maybe saying, hey, how could we have the resources that you already have and how could we bring them to our students? Another thing that really would help benefit mental health is physical health. That's a really big component of mental health. And so as a fitness instructor, I do spend a lot of time working one-on-one with people at the rec center, and I think it would be pretty easy for me to step in there and ask them like how we could expand our gym hour, or not expand our gym hours, but expand, like add some more gym classes, because that's something that is very attainable and actionable. So, yeah.
My first point is really, if these are long-term projects and we kind of recognize that this role is held for a year, if the work isn't done now, then when will it happen? How are we going to tackle these long-term issues? Also, I do want to recognize, I think, Michaela, you kind of touched on this too, but changing campus culture to really emphasize why did you come here? I had a conversation with a prospective student randomly the other day about, how happy is William & Mary? And this really got me to thinking about these and why somebody would want to come here and what we can do to really build that up.
Yeah, I agree with Connor's point that although some of these initiatives and platform things can seem long-term, we underestimate the willingness of the administration to listen and implement the things that students want to see on campus. And although some may be more tangible, like having wellness days, we already have ongoing initiatives with so many different campus partners, and I don't see a point in us taking credit or taking up space for what these organizations are already doing.
I think, yeah. All right, I was gonna say, I think that's fantastic, and I think doing long-term change is perfect too, as well as thinking about like more short-term attainable things, because as like all of us can say, because we've been involved in student assembly for so long, we know that things take years and years to go, and so we could still have those processes in the back of our minds and working on them, but that doesn't really affect, like help the students that are graduating soon or are graduating before we are able to do those activities.
All right, so for the next question, funding for clubs and organizations is incredibly important to the William & Mary community, but student assembly may not be specifically close to such organizations. How do you, as president, plan on getting closer with the student body and its organizations? John?
Yeah, so again, one of our biggest points is asking and going to these different organizations to see what they need and to supplement and the resources that they have. Something that we hope to implement is asking different organizations who are affected by the bills that we pass to come and speak on their behalf, to advocate for their needs, and to see how the funding or whatever we're going to pass directly impacts them. And I think that we've made some really strong changes, especially with the new financial quarterly system, being able to assist clubs and organizations give direct input in the short term, as well as if they need to apply for longer term funding to see what they need. But yeah, our biggest points were making sure that the community and the organizations affected were directly involved in these conversations and making sure that student assembly is not the one dictating their terms or assuming their needs.
Well, the Buhala Goodman era just passed a new financial reform thing, so I think that is fantastic. And I would love to see how that goes this upcoming year. So I don't think it would be much for me to talk about how I would change something that was just changed. So I would like to mention, or touch on the outreach aspect. I would love to have these things called chat and choose, which are different than office hours. Because as a peer, we should never have an office hours. We should have one-on-one conversations. And so at these chat and choose, I think different people should be able to come up and talk to me about how they feel about their financial struggles in the clubs and stuff and how they want more money. And then that would be a really great place to have a one-on-one conversation to see how they possibly have thought of improving that and take that back and put into action.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two parts to this question. The first part kind of focuses on outreach, or not outreach, finance. And the big point that I want to emphasize here is outreach. So there were the recent finance reforms, so switching to a quarterly system, which allows more flexible access to funds, and people don't have to, or orgs don't have to plan a whole year in advance for an event. And so I think it's really about getting that information out to as many people as possible, presenting it, getting it in front of them so they're aware of the resources available to them is really, really important. Another thing I'm hoping to do, I mentioned the endowed perpetuity earlier. Another application of this that I talked with some club org leaders is potentially using it to cover organizational dues when there's demonstrated financial need. Some organizations don't necessarily have a national chapter or central entity that's able to help cover that, and so they have to bear those costs on their own, and so that would help alleviate some financial burden. As far as getting out and hearing more about organizations, a big thing of our platform, we really want to host town halls and encourage meetings with clubs and orgs, or just students, individuals in general. Just bring your ideas. Now, there is a fine line of overstepping, which I think John kind of did a good job of bringing up. We don't want SA to be, this overarching dictator. We want them to be a resource for clubs to turn to. And also, I really want to change kind of this culture in student assembly that I've seen over my years serving there. We need to go to events. We sponsor events and don't show up to them, especially MCOs. We can help set up, help with outreach in any capacity, and really help increase the impact of all of these things that we fund. And finally, I kind of wanted to touch on this idea on maybe an expansion of TribeLink, kind of this RSO database, and including a little bit of an alumni list and registering them with the advancement office. So that way people and alums there's at least a network that they can communicate with. They can donate money back to this organization that they were a part of. And that's something we really want to look into as well, and the feasibility of that. So, thank you.
Yeah, so I think for my rebuttal, it's more of a question. First of all, I'm not really sure what an endowed perpetuity is. And I didn't understand the purpose of allocating reserves in which Student Assembly uses that money towards funding Plan B, subsidized pregnancy tests, and how that differs from organizations already applying for funding that they need, and also if it's even allowed.
And for my rebuttal, I would like to say, no matter who you vote for, it's important. I think Connor's touched on a really important topic about how student representatives need to show up more for their events. So when you're looking to vote for people, make sure that's something that you're paying attention to in general.
So yeah, basically with regards to the endowed perpetuity, SA has experienced kind of a growth in reserves. And with these reserves, right now it's not allowed, but we can apply to have that be allowed. It's something that the school already does with its endowment. And basically what you do to endow it is you invest it the similar way the endowment is, and you collect interest off the top. So it's a very sustainable way to continue to have extra money to spend without unsustainably dipping into reserves in the future. And so that would also, I wouldn't bring this amount lower than the historic average of what Student Assembly normally has in reserves. I hope that helped answer your question.
Issues have arisen at William & Mary, including conflicts regarding housing and pass-fail courses. Student Assembly has little control over these issues. However, the relationship between student body president and the administration is a crucial one. How can you bridge the gap between Student Assembly and the administration as student body president to address these issues? Michaela?
Great question. So I think that's one of the most important things for your student body president, to be someone that has a good relationship with administration. So for me personally, I am very vocal in everything that affects students, but I'm also someone that has always had like really good relationships with administration. As my role as Arts Visioning Committee, like student representative, I sit down and I talk with a lot of faculties, and I'm involved in a lot of big decisions about like the new buildings and stuff like that. And so it's been a great opportunity to see how that could play out, and I'm sure that can transfer anywhere else. Then I also do have a lot of conversations with Catherine Rowe already, just like when we stop by, and like she's a really like nice person, so she loves chatting with everyone. So I think that would just full on like followed through. And I've never had any like negative interaction with administration, so I think that's also like a benefit too. Yeah.
Yeah, so the two things you mentioned in the question, so housing and pass-fail, so these are both topics those I was actually able to already kind of work on behind the scenes. Oftentimes administration is, they're not as closed off as it is. If you do some research and figure out who to email, there are actually a lot of people really willing to work with you and have student input and set up a call to bring you into the fold. And with regards to housing already, I was working behind the scenes. We were lobbying for the delaying of the OTP improvements to help alleviate the wait list. And I'm also involved off campus with regards to affordable, equitable student housing and bringing that three-person question into concern. I mean, I'm up there on the planning commission, and we're having like angry locals come in citing the creation of student slums, pointing at me, calling me like not a land owner and everything. So it's really important that we have those student voices there. I've also been working with administration since day one. I have a really good relationship with them. I've been volunteering at a lot of events, and really have been running point on that front. I'm also a president's aide this year. I believe others have, a good number of students have done that as well. But that also helps, get a foot in the door, get to meet your administrators, and kind of establish that relationship over time. So yeah, I think that kind of covers my bases there.
Yeah, I think that I've been dealing with this a lot, and I've learned a lot from being chief of staff this past year. I've had the privilege of serving on the Board of Visitors, Committee on Student Experience. I'm also a president's aide, and I'm a part of the Provost Working Group on Climate, as well as the Provost Working Group on Academic Stress. And I found that in every single one of these roles, what's lacked is student voice, and not just mine, because it is not my story or my experience to tell, but inviting different groups, different students who are affected by these issues to come directly and talk with these administrators. And I agree that administrators, I think a lot of the time we undermine their ability and their willingness to work with students. But instead, our administration would focus on not making sure that we assume or make or tell these stories on their behalf, but empowering students to talk and to tell their stories.
A rebuttal.
Okay, yeah. On that note, I also really want to emphasize the work with regards to housing, too, that I've been working on. I know it was an AE situation. I had a student reach out about not being on the wait list for, even despite having SAS accessibility services. So I've really been working on that front. And John, I kind of had a question. You mentioned that you've been on all of these things, and it really didn't help. So assuming that we can't expand the number of voices in those spaces, if your voice couldn't bring that change, what will?
I think that's a really good question. So I found in those experiences being able to empower these voices. So for the Board of Visitors Committee on the Student Experience, I invited different groups to come and speak. I advocated for a student panel in the Wellness Center to speak on their experiences. For the Provost Working Group on Academic Stress, we invited Student Assembly, the Health and Safety Department, Academic Affairs, and as well as Mindversity, Tribe Innovation, and different organizations around campus to come and speak. So I agree that yes, thank you.
While all of the issues addressed by each candidate's campaign are important, many of these issues are not simple or quick fixes. With that, what are the priorities of your campaign, and how do you plan on following through on your campaign promises?
All right, yeah, so to start with that, I guess I'll answer the second part of the question. So how do I plan to follow through? I'll answer that first. I've worked really hard these past couple of years to kind of front load all of my major requirements and everything, and really leave a lot more elective spaces in this next year, and let go of that. In addition, I've also been realizing that a lot of the work as student body president is in line with the things I'm doing off campus, and with the carbon proxy working group, for example, and developing that. And so actually I feel like my work will streamline in a sense, and it will be much easier to tackle these kinds of problems, since this is the work I largely do, and it won't be as distracted by other responsibilities. And could you repeat the first part of that question again, please?
Yeah, of course. With all of the issues addressed previously by each candidate's campaign, although they're important, many of these issues are not simple and quick fixes. With that, what are your priorities in your campaign?
Right, and so priority-wise, obviously, I think mental health and wellness is really come to the forefront, both personally and I think just objectively. We want to have a happy campus. That's our purpose as student government, is to make this a better place to live and want to be here. So that's what I'm really trying to emphasize there. Another big priority is amplifying marginalized communities, really building that bridge. Like I talked about earlier, Bryce and I realized that we don't have that diversity on our ticket, which is why we're really reaching out to individuals and making sure they have a space in all areas, not just DEI bulleted points. So yeah, I think that covers our priorities.
So I think I would refer back to our platform. We designed it very specifically to make sure it's action-oriented out of things that we can promise the student body. And we didn't want to reiterate things that were already occurring on campus, taking credit for initiatives that other departments, offices, organizations were doing. And we found it important that it was more beneficial to have a couple of very driven and researched groups and initiatives than to have a bunch of platforms that were a mile wide and an inch deep, right? So Jasmine and I do bring a wide variety of diverse experiences, both as people, as students of color, as well as first generation low income. we found that, again, amplifying these student voices, making sure that they have the resources that they need, and we are supporting them in whatever way possible.
So my main thing for my platform is outreach and transparency. And so to do that, I feel like I've already kind of begun my process, and I'm really involved in school, and I talk to so many people, and I'm super approachable, and that's exactly what is needed as a student president. Kind of similar to Connor, he like streamlined all his major requirements. So did I, and I would be taking 12 credits. That is the best year, and everyone should try to do that, take 12 credits your senior year. But I would be doing that, and in the beginning of the semester, I will have so many times for people to come and chat with me so that I can really understand what the student body wants. So the beginning fall semester, you're gonna be sick of seeing my face, because I'm gonna be at every event. I'm gonna be having like so many sessions where you come out, chat me, tabling, just sitting outside, because syllabus week, you're not doing any work. So I'm gonna really harp on that and make sure that I understand what the student body wants. And then from there, I would go ahead and chat with people and make sure that I can make those things actually happen.
Yep. And there's two things I kind of want to emphasize here. First, we didn't put anything on our platform that wasn't researched already, or we didn't have at least one conversation about the feasibility of it. Even if it is a long-term project that we know we can't do in a year, it's really important that we get started on it, or at least lay the foundation, because ultimately, when else is it going to happen, especially if it has to be driven by the students. Additionally, this platform, I know it is largely written by students. It's been shaped by individual ideas and thoughts, and we've received a ton of feedback over this week and have tracked that, and we are prepared to share that in our platform as well.
I think I've learned this past year serving as chief of staff, that having such a broad platform can sometimes be restrictive and can limit the things that we can do on campus, especially as representatives, because if we put ourselves stretched way too thin over things that we can't promise to the student body, it isn't beneficial for anyone. So again, we put these, our research and our effort into a couple of very well researched and action-oriented items, and making sure that everything in the future for our administration is community-driven, making sure that we hear from students directly.
As my time serving as Secretary of Outreach, I've worked a lot with like chief of staffs, and like I've also gotten a bunch of feedback for student assembly. I was the person that went through and read all the feedback, so I know exactly what students want and need, and I just need the platform to get there and reach out to students and chat with them. So yes.
What can you bring as student body president that you would not be able to do in any other role in student assembly? And what sets you apart from other candidates? John.
Yeah, so, sorry, could you repeat the question?
What can you bring as student body president that you would not be able to in any other role in student assembly? And what sets you apart from the other candidates?
I think as student assembly president, the biggest thing that I would be able to bring is the platform to empower and amplify voices and communities, organizations around campus. It's amazing the resources that student assembly has access to, as well as the connections with administrators, funding, as well as just manpower. I think we forget sometimes how large and inclusive student assembly is. And as chief of staff, I had experience working with all 70, 60 some people in all these different areas, willing to do the work, working to make sure that organizations are supported, that we are able to implement effective change on campus. I believe that's something, again, that sets us apart from the other candidates, is making sure that we are community focused. And for us, that means going to them, having office hours, inviting them to come to Senate meetings every Tuesday and give presentations on what they're up to, how we can best support them, as well as continuing education for student assembly members. So we also outlined in our platform mandating sexual assault prevention and resources for elected representatives, and every single member of Student Assembly, as well as DI trainings, because we believe that continued professional development and hearing directly from students is a way for us to keep updated with our community and making sure that we are listening to as many people as we can.
I believe the one thing that sets me apart from my other candidates is that I have very great organizational skills. And this can be seen in my major. I'm a business major. And so a lot of the things that my time in Student Assembly has shown me that a lot of things can be improved if we improved internally. So in no other place except for President could I sit down and reshift our internal organization. And so that would just be like better communication between cabinet and Senate. There's a lot of people from Student Assembly that work in here that have been involved in Student Assembly, and you guys know that needs to be like reshifted. And so that is something that I can do. I've thought it out, I've worked it out. We're gonna have like some more team bonding, just really to make ourselves feel comfortable, because once you work perfectly inside out, you're gonna work perfectly on the outside in. So that is something that that I feel really sets me apart. And literally all my classes are business classes, so it's what I learn every day. And then another thing that's like separates me from the rest of the candidates is that I do not have a vice presidential candidate, and you guys are probably like, what is going on? Well, the vice presidential candidate would be picked by Senate, and so I think that'd be pretty amazing to have someone that is actually like your representative's choice. And I just had a hard time picking a vice president that wasn't fully into it. Like their whole like emotions weren't in Student Assembly, and I do not think that would have been fair for the student body. So that's why I decided to run by myself and have the vice president picked by Senate, which were voted on by representatives.
Yeah, so I think as a student body president, you really get to kind of set the agenda for the year and inspire people for the year to come. I know right now I've kind of been exposed to the culture in Student Assembly, where there's kind of an emphasis on, for example, quantity over quality. It's also kind of a bubble for the most part. It's no secret that Student Assembly and everybody associated with it is kind of like a little bit separated from the rest of the community. And it's really about breaking that apart, and I see great potential for that as student body president. Additionally, we made sure that in our platform, we really made sure, especially the big picture items, that it's a connected network of initiatives. There's nothing that's standalone. Whenever there's something on one platform, let's say like those wellness surveys to help provide a metric, it's also being used to combat loneliness in student and elderly populations as like community impact. I think it's really important that as a leader, and I think that what sets me apart is having so many things that tie together to address all these issues, which makes it a little bit easier to bring these big changes to campus. Additionally, I'm looking at an endowed perpetuity as well as combating loneliness. And the research I've done for the sexual assault resources on campus, I feel like is pretty unmatched by the other platforms, and it's something I've spent a lot of time working on, especially in the past couple of months. Also looking at an internal change and expansion of the public affairs and outreach departments. I feel like the outreach department could really use additional staffing to help support RSOs. They should be able to use it as a resource to help get more information out there, get more people to their events. That's ultimately what we're here for. We're a resource. And public affairs, I mean, very few places in the world have a place, there's no university that's so integrated with the city that it's in. And we have such a big emphasis on government and IR departments at the school that I feel like by expanding the public affairs department, we can really take advantage of the city we're in and shape local politics. And finally, within regards to like cabinet positions as well, I was looking into having a position, and this was an idea brought forth to me, a position to run point on Black-owned businesses to expand internships to the Black students at William and Mary. So.
I think something I would like to add to my original statement as Student Assembly President, you have a very unique opportunity to help facilitate coalitions around campus. And I think Connor briefly touched on this, but being able to connect all these different organizations who have the same purpose and goals and making sure that they are talking to one another. And I would also love to help shift the culture within Senate and making sure that they are voting on behalf of their constituents and putting aside things like personal biases. And although like passions and things like that can help, making sure that they are doing what's best on behalf of the student body.
I would first like to say, Connor, I'm gonna go home and look up endowed perpetuity because I've heard it so many times and I'm like, what is that? But I would also like to say that I agree with everything they've said, but I would do something a little slightly different. Instead of adding more like undersecretaries and things of that nature, I would have undersecretaries from diverse backgrounds because this is a business major in me, but the more people you have in an organization, the harder it is to run. So yeah.
Right, and on that note, yeah, I'm right there with you. I've been on too many task forces or teams that are just too big to be effective, and nothing can come out of that. Another thing I wanted to kind of bring up is the ability to send emails to the entire student body. I have a blast writing emails for the junior class. Sorry, any juniors, if you're getting them, but I see that as a great way of kind of shaping how we can get that information out. And then as far as John brought up about, getting organizations, grouping them together and having them network. I know my freshman year there was a group of all like the wellness or like health and wellness related organizations. And we were hoping to expand that to all so that there's increased collaboration and coordination between different groups. Thank you.
All right, so we would like to end today with some closing remarks from each of the candidates. If there is any further commentary that candidates would like to address that they did not have time to discuss in their allotted time, or if there are any final remarks that candidates would like to leave the student body with, they may do so at this time. For closing remarks, each candidate will have 2 minutes with 30 seconds grace period, and once again, after 2 minutes, we will raise our hands, and then at 30 seconds, we'll let you know that your time is up.
Are we starting?
Yeah, Michaela.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would just like to say thank you for everyone for coming, and I hope that you got what you came for. And while we have been like talking about our different platforms, I'd like to say that like while we're all running against each other, you literally can't go wrong with any one of us. We've all worked really closely hand in hand in student assembly for at least the past 2 years together. And so I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to sit down and work with both John and Connor. And so like I think it's really important when you cast your vote not to think about like who's been campaigning the hardest, who's been like doing digs, who's been saying this, that, and the third, but maybe just think about who's gonna like be best for you and who's gonna take the opportunity to like work for you. It's not about who's done the most bills, who's like been involved in student assembly the longest, just the person that's gonna take their time to listen to you and then actually put that to action. And that goes for like student body president, that goes for your like class representatives and all of that. I think one of my goals for running was just to like emphasize how important student assembly representatives are. So just remember that your representatives shouldn't be the people that are like talking to you and telling you what they want to accomplish, but should be like reaching out to you and trying to hear what you want accomplished.
Oh, it's
Connor.
me. My bad. To start, I would like to highlight that, Bryce and I are very aware of our limited perspectives relevant to the broader campus and kind of reiterate that we've made it a priority to bridge that gap and have worked with student leaders in marginalized communities to develop specific initiatives. Furthermore, we recognize that a lot of issues that are not directly related to DEI continue to have disparate effects on people due to their race. For example, I have seen as a student athlete how campus culture and stereotyping can target athletes of color, especially since athletics is one of the most diverse populations on campus. We want to amplify the voices of diverse communities on this campus beyond the traditional DEI narrative to celebrate their successes and include them in every conversation. Now, I'd also like to take this opportunity to kind of speak about the integrity of the democratic process within which we are all running. For some background, a Class 3 violation in the elections process is an egregious act done to undermine our democratic process. In the past 7 days alone, only our campaign has been targeted by numerous Class 3 violations, including 1, anonymous attacks on our character that have directly influenced questions we have received from the student body, and 2, the removal or vandalism of our campaign materials. All of these actions appear to have been or explicitly are done in support of the Cho Martinez campaign. Although there is an issue of anonymity in these cases, there's a stipulation in the code that calls on a candidate to be held responsible for the actions of their supporters. Yet no action has been taken by the IEC on grounds that insufficient evidence exists that these attacks are done by supporters. These attacks include a false allegation accusing Bryce, a survivor of sexual assault, which is being investigated by legal authorities for slander and defamation. The mental health toll on my campaign team, myself included, is significant. It's ironic that the Cho Martinez campaign runs on a platform emphasizing mental health and support for survivors, and yet they have done nothing. Although it has been acknowledged privately that these posts exist, their campaign, their inaction to disavow these attacks demonstrate a blatant hypocrisy for the values emphasized by their platform. There are matters that rise above simply trying to win an election, and a false allegation of sexual assault against a survivor nonetheless is an attempt to destroy the reputation of Bryce while diminishing and minimizing the experiences of every survivor on this campus. It shows survivors that it is okay to have their stories co-opted for personal gain. I know that if I were unable to keep my supporters or team in check, then I would certainly reflect on my ability to run student assembly effectively. If the roles were reversed, I would wholeheartedly work to discredit this disinformation and protect the integrity of our democratic process. A true leader must be able to recognize right from wrong. There are times when it is important to demonstrate moral awareness and stand on principle. This is one of those times. Thank you.
I think I want to end off by saying I am so sorry that those things happened, and our campaign had no knowledge nor would endorse any of that kind of behavior. We tried to work with the Independent Elections Commission, as well as reaching out to Connor multiple times and making sure that we protect the integrity of the election process and everything within it. I think it's hard sometimes because in the face of competition in elections, it's hard to differentiate between competition and what we're doing to run to be your next student body president. And like Michaela kind of touched on, I encourage you all to look at our platform, our message, our values, and vote for the person that you share your ideals with, your vision, your passions, and who can bring you the most to the student body. And I encourage you all, if you have any messages that resonate with either of us, to vote for us. And I hope you will vote for Jasmine and I as we try to build community together.
Well, that's all the questions we have. Thank you to all of the candidates for coming out and answering some questions from the student body. And thank you to the student body for showing up and listening to what our candidates have to say. Have a nice night, all.
Thank you.